He works. Today's speaker is no, okay, we'll skip that. He works for the city, he works for the citizens as the city engineer as well as the deputy public works director. He hiked 2,650 miles on the Pacific Coast Trail. And these are some numbers because we work together, our offices are right next to each other. 2,650 miles, 34 pair of socks, and 5 pair of shoes. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ryan Morrison. That should work.
Jim, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I get the opportunity today to talk to you about something that has been a passion of mine for decades and that I had the opportunity to do in 2016. And that was to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, which if you're not familiar, it is a long trail which goes from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, 2,650 miles. And it is one of what we call the Triple Crown. There's also the Appalachian Trail, which is 2,200 miles over the East Coast, and the Continental Divide Trail, which is 3,200 miles in the middle of the United States. I only did the one, the Pacific Crest Trail. I'm still looking for some time to do the other 2 trails. But what happened is in 2016, I had this opportunity, and I call this the long walk home because I went from the Mexican border to the Canadian border. So I essentially got dropped off at the Mexican border and I walked home. A little bit about myself, just an introduction. I grew up in California, Central and Northern California. I spent a lot of time outdoors, hiking, backpacking, fishing. So just being outside was something I'm very comfortable with. I've always tried to spend multiple days out, just even solo, in my own head, just out on the trail, walking. These are just some trips I've done over the years, and winter, summer, all different times. Most of these from Washington. I've done a lot of them here in Washington over the past decade. And some more shots. These are on the Pacific Crest Trail. So I first learned about the Pacific Crest Trail in 1993 when National Geographic published an article. They had officially completed the trail. And I became obsessed with it at that time. And I always wanted to hike the whole trail. I always wanted to figure out a time to do that. After high school, I had planned on doing it. Life got in the way. I joined the Navy. I decided I wanted to try to do it after the Navy. Life got in the way again. Got married, moved, and I just figured I'll do it someday. Someday I'll hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And I kind of kept kicking it down the line. The reason why it became so important to me eventually is in 2010, I came down with an illness called reactive arthritis, and it took away my ability to walk. And I was in a cane for 4 months and knee braces off and on for 2 years after that, and couldn't walk a mile with that incredible pain. And having that taken away from me really made me kind of reflect a little bit. At the same time, I was going through a divorce at that time and going through some life and career changes. So it was a really rough year. And as I came out of that illness and life, the Pacific Crest Trail just came back in a resurgence, and hiking and backpacking became a very important part of who I am and what I do. So that's kind of why the Pacific Crest Trail, my personal history with it, was really important when the opportunity came up. So there's some passes here in Washington State. Again, just some pictures of areas that I've hiked before the PCT. But of course, we want to know about the actual trail, right? The experience of hiking for that long. So it took 4.5 months to hike 2,650 trail miles, or 3,000 miles roughly plus total to actually do the hike. This is the Goat Rocks Wilderness. And this is a section of the Pacific Crest Trail up by the Canadian border. And these are some of my favorite shots. I have 850 pictures, not today. I have 850 pictures total, and I still find it emotional just to go through all of my pictures. But ultimately, a little more detail on what the Pacific Crest Trail is. 2,650 trail miles. It changes each year based on fires a little bit. It alters a little, couple miles. But it passes through 5 national monuments, 6 national parks, 25 national forests, wilderness areas, 57 major mountain passes. It is pedestrian and equestrian only, so no bikes, no motorized vehicles, only for horses and foot traffic. It was officially completed and dedicated in '93, but work actually started on it back even in the 30s, mainly from the Boy Scouts of America. They started on sections down in California, and then they worked on it for years trying to get land rights to complete the entire trail. And then it's managed by various services, including the Pacific Crest Trail Association, which they do trail maintenance up in this area as well to maintain the trail. So planning, what does it take to actually hike the PCT? I'm an engineer, sorry. So lots and lots of spreadsheets. I planned this, by the time I got permission for my job at the time, it was about 6 months before I was going to set out on the trail. So I started putting together spreadsheets of how many calories I was going to consume each day, what my meal planning was, where all my stops and resupplies were going to be. It is a 5-month journey, or 4.5 months as long as I did it. And it's really hard to conceptualize that in one big project in your mind. And so the best way to approach it is by, instead of one big 4.5-month backpacking trip, a bunch of 1-week trips, all back to back. And to start looking at what your resupply locations are. I had 30 resupply locations along the trail. Over half of them were in towns, where I would go in and I'd go to a local store, I'd hitch a ride in, and then they'd be able to resupply at a local store, sometimes a gas station. You get what you can out there to be able to eat. And then I set up boxes. And I would mail myself boxes at certain points. So I had all these set out with all their spreadsheets and everything in them, that I would mail ahead. And I would mail them ahead as I went, and I would pull into the post office and I would pick up my box. I had various things in there. Sometimes it was additional shoes, more socks, cash for spending in towns. One of the best things when I was buying all my food at Costco and all the stores, I was walking out of Safeway when I was, staging everything, and there's a Girl Scout out front. So I only read the booth in front of Safeway selling the Girl Scout cookies, and I just had a light bulb moment. Ran to the ATM, came back, and I bought 20 boxes of Girl Scout cookies right then and there. So every one of those has 2 packets Thin Mints. And it almost became my trail name at one point. And if you're familiar with it, a lot of times when you're on the trail, people take up a different moniker, a different name that they identify with. And usually it's given to you, you get to accept it or not. My name became Storm Chaser, or Chaser for short, and around 700 miles in, there was a bunch of thunderstorms right before you enter the Sierra Nevada. And I like to chase after storms, I love them. And so everybody was diving and hiding from the lightning and thunder, and I went hiking about 5 miles an hour, running after this thing to get in front of the thunderstorm, so that I could camp out underneath it and get rained on and not hit by lightning, but be close. So it's just another obsession of mine. So Storm Chaser ended up becoming my name, or Chaser for short. So training, walk a lot. That's what you do all day long. Your entire purpose of the whole thing is to just walk every day. You get up at 6:30 in the morning, you walk all day long until the evening. So the only way to walk 20 miles a day on average is to practice walking 20 miles a day on average. Do it with weights and then test all of your gear. So I was hiking every single day, locally, at least 5 miles, if not 10 or 15 miles on the weekends, just to kind of train my body up. And it's not strength and it's not power that allows you to do a trail like this. It's endurance and perseverance. It's most of the people that I saw lose go off the trail was not due to, it was mainly due to an overuse injury, like a tendon or something like that, like it stretched too far. And so they would have to get off the trail because they worked something not too hard, but too much, too often. So day one, hiking on the trail. It's not this well signed the entire way. It gets a little bit more remote. But this is at the Mexican border. My parents dropped me off, and that's my dad there. He hiked the first mile with me. So it's there's a monument there, and then there's a monument that's just similar to that at the Canadian border. That is day one as you start hiking through the desert. And the first 700 miles of the trail is going through the desert, going through the Mojave Desert, the Ansborrego Desert, various terrain out there. You go up on top of the ridge as much as possible, but you go down to some of these really hot areas as well. When I was there, I was lucky in 2016, they had a super bloom. So all of the desert was in bloom. All the flowers were just going crazy. This year, I think all the rain they've had down there, they've got another super bloom going on in Southern California. Beaver tail cactus, the flannel bush yucca was going like crazy. Yucca, I was told, tastes like celery, but nobody ate it, probably because it tastes like celery. So we never actually got to prove that, but it was a beautiful plant. And it's the desert, and I started on May 6th of 2016, and it is hot, starting to get off hot there. And so a lot of times during the day, you would be hiding from the heat, especially in the midday. So you get up sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd hike until around 11, and then you'd hide underneath a bridge or a culvert until about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you'd start hiking until about 11 o'clock, and then you'd sleep for another 4 hours, and you kind of alternate that during the desert time. Desert temps would get up to be 105, 100, somewhere in that times fairly regularly, and you did not want to hike through that. Water is critical, of course, out there, and you'll go through it a lot faster if you're sweating it out. And it's 2.2 pounds per liter. I was carrying around 6 liters at most on my backpack, and that was over half my pack weight. So that really weighed you down. You can only go so far with that much water on your pack. The more water you carry, the slower you go, and you need to make that 20 to 30 miles before your next water source, before you run out. Otherwise, you can get in some serious trouble. And of course, with all that night hiking, there's all kinds of adventures that come with that. This was one of many rattlesnakes that we encountered on the trail. This one in particular, there's the footprint is right there, right next to him. He was just sitting there waiting for an ankle to come right by him. He was hunkered down in the sand, catching the heat of the day, and just very luckily we had our headlamps on and was able to see him before we actually hiked by and someone felt something pinch their ankle. This was a very lucky moment, actually, because usually we were not hiking with our headlamps on because we were saving batteries. We were just hiking by the moonlight, just following the trail, and we didn't actually carry our headlamps on us. I'll tell a story too. I saw 2 skunks on the trail. They're nocturnal creatures. Both times it scared the heck out of us, and luckily no one got sprayed because that would be good training. So the first one was actually shortly after this, and the skunks were kind of funny because they would jump out in the trail in front of you, and then they'd run up the trail ahead of you, and then they about a quarter mile and they duck back in. So you'd be walking along a quarter mile, and they jump back out again, and they go running up. So you get that repetitive over and over and over again. So you started getting scared, like he's going to pop out of here anywhere. You might see him. So the kangaroo rats did the same thing, but they were much more adorable. So they would sit there and stare at your headlamp and I don't know what you are, and hit them with their hiking pole and jump off about 3 feet. California Aqueduct under the concrete. Again, hiking through the desert. It was sort of ironic to have that long, huge section of the trail with no water, but you're hiking on top of the California Aqueduct. There was actually at one point, there was a spigot though. There was a spigot they put in for hikers around the midpoint between the water. Water's critical in the desert. So we call it the dirt tan, the hiker tan. So that's my soft line. The dirt and the dust of the desert just keeps coming up and covering your legs constantly. You can't wash it off. Water is too precious to be able to just wash it off regularly. So you just kind of accepted it. It would cake on so thick it would start to flake off. So you just kind of live with that environment for about a month. The top right there, that's a great water source. It's just a half a keg and a pipe stuck in the ground. That was fantastic water. Still filtered it. The bottom one though was the horse trough. Yes, I drank out of that. I had a very good filter, but sometimes you had no choice. And a portion of the desert as well was the windmills. That was an interesting night actually, because we had to just keep walking because I didn't want to sleep underneath those with the constant.
Is that near Palm Springs?
It would be probably about 50 to 100 miles north of Palm Springs. Yeah. If I recall correctly, I think this is just north of I-15. There, yeah. So, and then, but there's the sheep, the kind of camouflage in there. And you go through a lot of different terrain. You're going north to south, you cross railroad tracks, you cross highways, state routes. You don't always have to play Frogger going across the road, although there have been a lot of injuries and fatalities on the PCT that have a lot of them from being hit by cars. Because the world, when you're walking at 3 miles an hour, the world really slows down. And so when you come up on a highway where everything's going 60, 70 miles an hour, it's hard to process that. Your mind slows down. It doesn't work at the same speed as everything else. And when you encounter other people, you talk slower. So some of these crossings are literal culverts, storm culverts, that you go through, and you just hope the flash flood doesn't come through at that time. Yeah. And then it sends you to some very unique areas. Safety hazard, this is where an Army helicopter had crashed years before, and so there was unexploded ordnance in the area. So for about a mile, there's no getting off the trail. And then there are some interesting places that you find as well. People and their dolls and their, yeah. Camp. So what was life like? My typical camp setup was a 2-person backpacking tent. That was pretty much home every night for almost every single night. I would occasionally cowboy camp, which is when you're not in a tent. And I only did that a couple of times, especially in the desert, because when something's crawling on you in the middle of the night and it's a scorpion or something, you'll set your tent up pretty quick. So, and in fact, this night, outside of Acton, so yeah, Southern California, the coyotes were running around my camp at night. And it wasn't dangerous. They were just running around and yipping and howling, but they kind of occasionally would just run within 5 feet of you. Wow.
Don't worry, we'll wait.
Trail life. So I did the trail solo. I thought about inviting someone or taking somebody with me, but for me, it was a very personal experience. And I knew that at that time, about 3,000 people probably were going to try to hike the trail, and roughly around 75% or so, well, sorry, about a third, I think, or so actually successfully finish the trail that start off. But you meet people all along the way. 90%, most people start southbound to northbound, about 10% go from the Canadian border down to the Mexican border. The timeline is different when you do it that way. But there are locations, we call them trail angels or hiker towns, where people will open up their homes, their yards to hang out, do laundry, camp, get resupply. You can mail your boxes to them. They'll give you a ride into town. And then we all kind of hang out and meet. You meet new friends. You might hike with them for a while, a couple weeks, and then they'll go around a bend in the trail and you'll never see them again. And it's just kind of very fleeting that way. Yeah, kind of hard to see, but someone had their truck, they would pick us up and we all just piled in the back of it and take us back and forth between town. And I hooked up with a couple of groups. In Southern California, it was Deuce and Cowbear were the trail names of the gentleman that I hiked with. And we were around the middle of the Sierra Nevada. I was solo for a while and I hooked up with Swiderman and Clam. A lot of food stocking. So this is at home, of course, prepping for everything, just getting all of my gear. This food, I mean, this maybe was a couple weeks. Near the end of the trail, I was eating 8 Snickers bars a day. I can't do that now. I wish I could, but I was eating those just for supplements, just to keep enough calories in me. Trying to consume around 6,000 calories a day and still lost weight. Still lost about 15 pounds on the trail. This is the summit of Mount Whitney, or coming up on the summit of Mount Whitney. You come out, you don't need a permit to climb Mount Whitney if you're coming up from the east side. And as part of the Pacific Crest Trail, you just hiked 1,000 miles, you're in great shape, you've lived at 10,000 feet, you're acclimated. Going up and summiting Mount Whitney, the highest mountain in the lower 48, is a day hike. It's just a short little hike. So I got up at 3 a.m., put on my headlamp, and it was dead. So I used my phone, and I was trying to be very sparing with my phone, with the flashlight on there. Well, luckily it was solstice, and it's the June 21st, and it was a full moon. So that's actually the moon way up there. And as I was summiting up on Whitney, the sun was rising out of the east, and the moon was setting in the west, and they kind of traded. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture. But there is a shadow streak on the very top, and that is the sun hitting the top of Mount Whitney and the shadow of Mount Whitney streaking across the haze. And that's the sun hitting the cliffs right as I was about to hit the summit. It was a very magical moment. I was solo at this time, and I had the summit of Mount Whitney to myself for about 15 minutes. This is more pictures from the Sierra Nevada. You hit several passes. You spend about 2 weeks over 10,000 feet. This is the highest point on the Pacific Crest Trail, 13,153 feet, Forester Pass. It's that tiny little notch there on the, about there. And you just go up a couple of really steep switchbacks. You cross a snowshoot, which is one of the only time I really did have to use my ice axe. And then you go down the other side and into these amazing glacially carved holes and canyons. These days we just had just a grin ear to ear for the whole time. It was incredible country.
Beautiful.
Gray Lakes, the fish, the golden trout were jumping constantly. It looked like water was boiling. You go pretty light. So unfortunately I did not bring a fishing pole. Because everyone say, oh, did you fish for food or whatnot? And I'm like, no. Didn't want to take the time, didn't want to carry the weight to do that. My pack weight, my base weight, so base weight is your pack weight with no food, no water, was about 15 pounds. And total pack weight on a section like this was be about between 25 and 30 pounds typically. And you're going through the Sierras. This would have been in June, so the snow is still melting. This year will be a very interesting year with the snow back in California for Pacific Crest Trail hikers. This is going to be covered in many feet of snow at this time of year, at this time in this year. But it led for freezing points. The water was 32 degrees basically going across these things, and your legs would know. And you had to do 5 or 6 of them a day sometimes. Various passes. This one is very iconic because this is Muir Pass. So John Muir, this is one of his favorite places, and they built this hut with a fireplace that's thousands of feet above tree line. So they used to bring the firewood out through donkey or through horse trains to up here to keep the place warm. This is coming up on Sonora Pass. Central California. There's a big snowshoot coming down the PCT on the Sonora Pass, and I'd say at least half of us went down it. We slipped. It was a pretty steep one. But overall, 2016 was not bad for snow. We had very minimal issues with snow, and I got very lucky. I had very minimal issues with fires. I only had one minor delay due to a fire. So Mount Lassen on the Hat Creek Rim. This was the second time I almost got sprayed by a skunk. I was up on the Hat Creek Rim, just looking over the edge, and heard something behind me, and I turned around, and there was a striped skunk just looking right back at me. We had a moment, and he ran away. So yeah, a lot of critters besides the skunks and scorpions. The mountain beaver on the top right is actually a threatened species, and I was not sure what it was at first. I had to look it up when I got home. It's basically kind of looks like a guinea pig. And then the black bear or the cinnamon bear. I saw 5 bears on the PCT, 2 of them were in California, and then I saw a mom and 2 cubs in Oregon. And Russian with River Wilderness, this was by far the most amazing sunset we have on the whole trail. And this is the Oregon border, and this is what some of the fellow hikers look like. This is not too dissimilar to what I look like. Kind of just some roving vagabonds. In California is a vast majority of the trail. It took 3 months to get to the California border, to get across the long way. And then Oregon, it took 17 days to walk across Oregon, and that was leisurely. And then it took about 25 days to get across Washington. All right, so yeah, you look a little. I didn't shave the entire time. I shaved, completely clean when I first started the trail, but I did not trim my beard the entire 4.5 months that I was on trail.
Is that Crater Lake?
That is Crater Lake. Yep, Crater Lake, Wizard Island, and the Wizard.
Yep.
Let's go through the Three Sisters Wilderness. That's sing song. He liked to sing songs while he was on the trail. Just kind of some people I hiked with for about a week, and they went into a town to resupply that I didn't go into, and I never saw them again. That is the toughest tree on the trail. In the middle of lava fields. Northern Oregon is massive lava fields, and you're hiking through a lot of these lava rock. It eats your shoes up, it eats your hiking poles up, and out of the middle of it, there was this tree growing. And I don't know what he's guarding, but it's pretty tough. I didn't get any closer.
Question.
Yeah.
Talking about hiking shoes, how many pair of shoes did you go through?
Yeah, so I did go through 5 pairs of shoes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you use trail runners. So they're kind of a softer bottom, but about 500 miles per pair of shoes. So about every 500 miles, I'd send myself a new pair of shoes. The Brooks Cascadia is a very common shoe to use on the Pacific Crest Trail. I use the Vast Line Benders on my particular hike. Any trail runner though, that's comfortable will do, because again, you're putting 25 to 30 miles in. And in Northern California and in Oregon, at that point, we averaged over a marathon a day. So we were doing 27 to 28 miles average every single day for about 45 days straight. We called it marathon month.
Is that near John Day? Did you get into the John Day volcanic area?
That probably is. This is by McKenzie Pass in the observatory. Yeah. And then, so yeah, here's the lava rock, what it does to your shoes. This is the trail kind of weaving through there, and then it just eats up into your hiking holes and just destroys them. And then Washington, there we are, Bridge of the Gods, we're crossing the Columbia River. That's actually from a prior hiking trip. I'll go a little quick because I would like to leave a few minutes for questions. There's always questions. It's a challenge to put 5 months of your life into a half-hour presentation in terms of what the highlights are. Mount Hood. This is the second opportunity it had to try and kill me. It's tried to do it twice now with windstorms. I'm not going back. I'm not giving it a third chance. Glacier Peak Wilderness. This is absolutely, in my opinion, the most beautiful section of the Pacific Crest Trail, and probably one of the most remote. And it's just right out here, not far away in a way. And Glacier Peak from the top of White Mountain, it is just the most amazing seat you can have. And then the fall color. So I started May 6th. I finished on September 21st. I told my wife I'd be home for our anniversary on the 22nd, so I had a goal. I made that. So I finished on the 21st, and then late August and September, the Cascades are absolutely beautiful with the huckleberries and the blueberries. You just gorge on them constantly, and of course the colors are turning. And then it started to snow. So you go from the desert and 100 degrees, and then next thing you go, you got 6 inches of snow on top of you the next morning, and 35-mile-an-hour winds and freezing wind chills. So it is an incredible environment you're constantly hiking through. That's why what I would say was my most first little favorite part of the PCT is all the different environments you hike through constantly. You go from the desert to oak trees with beaver-tail cactus to almost a rainforest type environment, from snow back down into desert. You're just constantly seeing it change, but at the pace of about 3 miles an hour. And there's the border, before and after. Same pants, different shirt. I went through 2 different shirts. Same hat. The hat, I could talk for half an hour on the hat alone. The hat's been around the world. But yeah, so there's the Canadian border. I did not cross the Canadian border and go in. I bounced off the border and came back down to Harts Pass because it was easier for my family to come and pick me up there versus to go into Canada, take a bus and go around. But final stats, 315,000 feet of elevation gain, 3,000 miles total when you really look at all the side trails you had to do to get into town to resupply. 137 days, 10 of those were what we call 0 days, where you're in town and you're not really hiking miles. Over 1 million calories consumed, easily 175 gallons filtered, 15-pound base weight, pack buried waste based on water and what else I was carrying. 5 pairs of shoes, 34 socks, 2 pairs of shorts, 2 pairs of shirts, or 2 shirts, and then yeah, would I do it again in a heartbeat? It was an incredible experience.
Well, for a person that walks, I walk 6 miles a day, so
Yeah,
I know it's, you go through a lot of shoes and everything else.
you do, yes, yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever feel in danger?
No, never really felt any danger. A couple of times when you're night hiking and you look down an alley, like a little canyon, you'll see a couple of eyes staring back at you, and usually deer. Never really felt anything in danger from the environment or from people or fellow hikers. The hiking community is absolutely incredible and very supportive of each other. Even hitchhiking, I hitchhiked several times. And Truckee, I was with a pizza box that said PCT hanging on the side. I got to be that guy in a roundabout. It was a new experience for me. And some guy in a Prius stopped and picked me up and took me up there and dropped me off at the trail. And it was just, yeah, very, very healthy.
While you were giving your presentation, you said "we" a lot.
Mhm.
So were you talking collectively about the people that you would meet on the trail and go up as a group and hike with them for a week or so?
Yes, and us hikers in general, like we as PCT hikers, you get a very strong identity. I know Ken, you've been on the trail, you had similar experiences or not, but you'd hook up with various people, and it was your community. You know, when you walk into town, you look at the people and then you'd see we call ourselves dirty hiker trash. And you see them over in the park and you're like, there's my people. And so we would just sort of have that collective mentality. So that's probably why I use we a lot.
Did you spend even one night, like in an Airbnb, super cushy bed, nice warm bath?
Yes.
Okay.
I spent 2 nights in, not Bridgeport. It was 2 nights and farther down. I spent 2 nights in Truckee because I had shin splints. It was my first 30-mile day and I had shin splints that I had to heal up. It takes more than 3 days to heal for shin splints, but I had to kind of power through. So I spent 2 nights in Truckee, 2 farther down south, and then occasionally a 1 night in just a hotel. Nothing too cushy or fancy. The minute they heard you were a PCT hiker, they're like, no. Yeah, exactly. Get the bad towels.
Did you have a communication cell or internet available to you most of the time?
No, only in towns. I had my cell phone with me and I was in airplane mode most of the time. So I had a small solar charger that I would charge either in town or would trickle charge while I was hiking on trail. In airplane mode, my phone would last about a week and I would just use it for pictures. And then when I get into town or I get into a major roadway, I would turn it on and then all the signals, texts and emails would come through. I did a couple of social media posts just for proof of life for folks to say, yes, I'm still out there. But overall, no, there's not a lot of signal on the trail and you would lose battery pretty quick if you left your phone on consistently.
Any other medical issues you can share with us?
Almost lost the toe on the trail. Overall, I was pretty scared that because of my reactive arthritis, that it was going to flare up on trail and I was not going to be able to complete it. My boxes, my resupplies, I only nailed the first 5 because didn't want to go pick them all back up if I had an issue. I had my knee brace with me for the first week or 2, but then was feeling fantastic. I had trained a lot beforehand. I'd done some 20-mile days, so I felt pretty good, but I took it with me just in case. But the reactive arthritis was my biggest threat in terms of that, but I still manage it to this day, and probably for the rest of my life, I'll have to manage it.
Did you run into any hikers or joggers or runners on the trail?
I did, yeah. So certain areas you get close to a trailhead, you'd start to know because people smell like deodorant and perfume. You'd see younger kids, you'd see trail runners, hikers, joggers. In the Sierras, we found quite a few pack trains. The horses and the donkeys would come through, and you have to get out of the way and get them right away to come through.
Hiker caused erosion on the trail. How big of a problem is it?
In certain areas like Yosemite, it was pretty significant. I didn't bring it with me here, but there's a portion of Yosemite where there's 5 trails next to each other. And they have a log that they keep moving across them and rotating the hikers to a different trail each time to allow years for the others to recover. So it kind of looks like a trek, like with different lanes and like a racetrack. So hikers leaving trash on the trail was unfortunately an issue. There was a group that was called the Pack It Out group that was specifically getting trash and taking the trash out. And any place that hikers were camping a lot was definitely having an impact on the environment. So in my personal opinion, yes, there's some portions of the trail are being loved to death.
Thank you for sharing such an amazing and personal. I get mad when Heather tells me to go grab the mail. I'm like, oh, that's 4,000 down. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. So some reminders before we adjourn, next week, provided that, Mother Nature